Okay, so with this video, this is a continuation of the previous video and a previous conversation. I was talking about my visit with Dr. Liu, and now I'm going to continue talking about my visit with Dr. Yoon. So this happened in the past, but some pretty interesting developments there, just so there's some context to my conversation now. I then had an appointment with Dr. Yoon, just a few days after my appointment with Dr. Liu. And I'm going into my appointment. She takes a look at my MARPE and she says, yeah, it failed, but it does look like there's some expansion in the posterior region, more towards the back of the palate. Perhaps it opened up in the back and not much in the front. And I was a little bit skeptical because I didn't really feel any breathing benefits, but I don't know. Maybe. The question is those screws definitely did move apart, right? And some of the moving apart was just tilting, but not all of it. So what happened? Did it drag through the bone, or did I get some expansion? And so she said, at this office, we don't have our CBCT scanning machine. So tomorrow, come back to our other office. We're going to do some scans. So I go in the next day, do some scans. She's looking at them, and she doesn't notice any expansion in the posterior region. She doesn't really notice a split suture even, or if there is, it's very subtle. One thing that she did note though is she noticed I have an extraordinarily large palatal bone, and I was able to sneak some photos of the screen to show you what I mean. This is what she's talking about. She says it's very tall and thick. She said the average patient is around 5 millimeters, whereas I'm 13 millimeters, almost 3 times more. And so that's why she thinks that the MARPE failed. I don't know why she didn't know that before I went into MARPE. I know she did some scans, but I guess they weren't CBCTs, but I gave her my CBCT file. Anyway, you can tell that Dr. Yoon is a high volume provider, very rushed. I've said it before, and just wait, you're gonna see more of that soon. So another reason why it failed, and I'm familiar with this, is that when you get MARPE, you ideally want to get what's called bicortical engagement. And what bicortical engagement means is that the screws of the MARPE go up into your palatal bone and break through the top of your palatal bone into the floor of your nose. Seeing as I believe the MSE screws are only 13 millimeters or so, and my palatal bone is 13 millimeters, and then the screws have to pass through a little extra distance to get to the end of the palatal bone, you can imagine that there was no way I was going to get bicortical engagement. And you can see in the CT scan, the screws are just sitting inside the palatal bone. I think that's one of the contributors to the tilting we saw. But by the way, you'll also see there wasn't any screw bending, just screw tilting, so it was kind of pushing through the bone. So anyway, I told her I met with Dr. Liu, and she's like, okay, good, yeah, Dome Mini, cool, get that. And I told her about the whole scheduling thing. I'm like, oh man, there's a whole year from now. And she says, oh, don't worry. The waiting list is almost certainly going to clear up, and you're going to have an appointment in January or February. Don't even worry. And I felt so great and relieved. Then she hit me with the real big news, which is she wants to try MARPE again in the meantime while we wait for the Dome Mini appointment to become available. She wants to, this time, she's going to create a custom MARPE device, not an MSE. And you might be a little bit confused by that statement. I know I was. So here's the difference between MARPE and MSE. MSE stands for maxillary skeletal expander, is a type of MARPE device. MARPE is mini screw assisted rapid palatal expander. The MSE is a single device. It's not custom. The only things you customize are the arms so that they fit on your bite. But the screw placement relative to each other, you just get what you get. It's convenient and quick, and if it works for certain patients, then that's great. It had a lot of thought go into its design. But sometimes the screws, you might want them to be at different places. You might want to optimize the treatment by having them in different parts of the bone. Not to mention, get this device, unlike the original MARPE, which is a 4-screw device, she wants to now try a 6-screw device. So a 6-screw device, now you're going to have 50% extra surface area pushing the bone apart so that each screw bears a little less of the load, and you also distribute out the force of expansion more along the palate. She's going to place it more posteriorly, and that's one of the reasons she wanted the 6-screw, is because she wants to place it posteriorly, but she wants to apply the force more anteriorly. I didn't really totally get why, but you'll be able to do that a little better. You get the best of both worlds with a 6-screw device. Makes me wonder why she didn't just... I feel like if she saw that my palatal bone was so big, she would have just given me a 6-screw device in the first place. So I'm a little bit bummed about that, but maybe she wouldn't have. I don't know. So anyway, the extra MARPE is going to be free. Obviously, I'm not excited about going through the implantation again and the expansion, but I'm not totally against it. One thing I am a little worried about is when the MARPE fails and the screws start tilting, but the device keeps separating, it starts to transfer the load from the bone to your teeth through the sleeves and the arms on the device. And I am a little bit worried. I'm going to bring it up to her. I'm a little bit worried about applying too much force on my molars. I know it's primarily a bone-borne device, but I just want to have all my bases covered. So anyway, she decides to remove my MARPE right then and there. And another testament to how damn busy she is that she was doing the removal while she was late to another MARPE installation with another patient. So she rushed it, and I didn't love that. But anyway, she didn't use any anesthesia. She said the needles of the anesthesia are painful in and of itself, and the removal is not much more painful. But I'll tell you for myself. So screwing out the screws, you know, it wasn't that bad until you get kind of to the end, and then it a little bit hurts. She had to go through using different devices, originally a screwdriver, and then she had to start using this like wrench to wrench them out. And once they're like almost out, it does hurt a bit, but it's doable. And when she removed all 4 screws, I was like, oh, okay, got through that. Not too bad, like we'll live. And then she drops the news on me. She says, okay, removing the sleeves from your molars is the more painful part. And I was like, uh-oh, okay. And the reason is, and I didn't even know this, they use an adhesive during installation. So these sleeves are glued to my tooth, and they're covering a lot of the surface area of my molar. And so she starts yanking it up, and it is so painful. It's so painful. It's bad, right? And she rips, and then one of the sleeves comes half out, and then she starts to move to the other one. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know." And then she's pulling, and I'm like, you know, making some noises, and it's bad. And she's like, okay, all right, like we're gonna cut the metal. And then I'm like, okay. So she gets out her little like dental drill, and she starts drilling the metal, right? And here I have a photo actually of the removed MSE. You can see that she has cut the metal, and then she continues to remove both sides, and it's still painful, but it's significantly less painful. And the drilling took like 1 minute per side, 2 minutes per side. Like, why don't they always drill it? Like, it's so confusing to me. I was like, you should just make this part of the protocol. Like, why wouldn't you drill the device? Even with that being said, I still had, and continue to have days later, a lot of sensitivity in my molars. It felt like my teeth were being yanked out, and so it was a little bit difficult to eat for a few days, and it still a little bit is. So anyway, I know you're all wondering, and waiting for it. Here's the photo of my mouth 30 minutes after the removal. You can see the screw holes. One thing that I was also concerned about is like you can see some like inflammation or blood, or it looks almost like gum recession on the inside of my molar. I asked her about this and she said, she took a look, she says, no, it just probably feels that way because you're inflamed, everything's okay. It's been a few days since then. Here's an updated photo and it feels fine, there's no gum recession. I wanted to also just drop a couple facts that she told me. One thing she said is that my bone is very thick, but you also don't want it to be too thin either, because then you're gonna very easily get screw drag. And by the way, bone is not only large, but it can have densities too. Some bone is dense, some bone is sparse, or I don't know if that's an appropriate word in this case. But another random fact that I'm gonna drop in is she said, if you get a suture split and then you heal the suture split, once the healing is fully done, you're gonna have more resistance if you ever want to do another expansion. I mean, you'll probably just get a surgical assist at that point, but the bone remodeling that happens after all the healing is done, what's left in the place of the suture is stronger than what the suture originally was. That's what she told me. And another thing on that note, I meant to mention this earlier. Dr. Liu said, he says that I told him, you know, I really had that feeling. I felt like my suture had split, my mid-palatal suture split. I felt it open, you know? And he says, oh, I totally believe that. The mid-palatal suture is not a major source of resistance. And he totally believes that, yeah, you got some tiny bit of expansion. The mid-palatal suture broke apart, but you didn't get any successive expansion because of the resistance of your rest of your face. But at the same time, you know, Dr. Yoon didn't really mention any suture split that she noticed on the CBCT. But the last thing she said is that to prevent the screw hole wounds from getting infected, you could use Presidex, but she seemed like she was in a rush. She says, I really don't think you will end up needing it, though. You can just use a saline rinse if you want to, but even then, I think you're going to be fine. And so far, I haven't done either, and I'm fine. Oh, and by the way, one of the things I realized is that one of the reasons she wants to put the device more posteriorly, even though she wants the load to be a little more anterior, it's this trade-off because the posterior region of my palatal bone is significantly shorter as the anterior region, and you can see that in the scan. So it's a lot easier to get bicortical engagement if the more posteriorly you place it, but then there's that trade-off. So having the 6 screw helps, but yeah. And then also, shoot, I'm saying all this stuff out of order. I made like a little bullet points, I just forgot. She's going to do a corticopuncture. She says she's going to do an aggressive corticopuncture. However, she says the corticopuncture device only drills down 3 millimeters, and you have 13 millimeters of palatal bone. She says she doesn't believe it's going to do much, but since the first one failed, we'll try everything. Anyway, that's my appointment with Dr. Yoon. I felt a little bit like, okay, well, Dr. Liu didn't seem to think that we should be doing another one. So I emailed him about it, and I just said, I ran it by him. I told him all the notes, and I said, hey, do you think this is a good idea? Do you agree with her here? I just want to get your opinion. And he doesn't seem to. He says, oh, I'm going to have a discussion with her and see why she doesn't want to just go to surgical assist. So I haven't heard a response back, but that's my update. It's been a pretty interesting week. There's a lot of twists and turns in my journey, and I don't exactly know where it's gonna go. The only reason I'm even slightly excited about having somewhat of a complicated case is because then I'm getting all this information and experience, and I'm sharing it through this medium. So anyway, happy holidays, and I have a couple videos in the pipeline that I'm really excited about, so stay tuned for that.